Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
I see you're eating on camera, Mickey. Exactly what they tell podcasters not to do. What you eating?
I'm eating a nacho because nachos are infrastructure, according to some bloggers. There was a popular tweet was nachos are infrastructure. So
you're eligible for a subsidy then, and the more you eat, the more money you'll get.
I'm eligible for the first tranche of the Biden infrastructure plan because this is more concrete than a lot of things in the second tranche.
You laugh, but nachos provide nutrients to the construction workers who build the bridges and the roads.
Well, yes, I made the foolish mistake of trying to actually dig into the infrastructure plan to see what was good and what was bad about it. And the results were alarmingly inconclusive. There's some things that obviously everybody wants to do, like replace the lead pipes that are, poisoning children's brains.
I favor that.
But then there's controversy, and maybe extend wireless internet to the hinterland, although it's only like 25% of the population. It seems to me if you live in the hinterland, you have to give up something.
But that's anyway, legit infrastructure still in the information age. That's legit.
It's a legit infrastructure. I'm for it. Then you have roads and bridges, guys like Matt Gaetz, who should be in favor of that sort of thing, is against it because he thinks the roads and bridges are fine. Having driven around a lot, I tend to think the roads could use some work.
I agree.
And Iglesias also pisses on a bit on mass transit on the grounds that the really important thing is getting the zoning changes that allow you to build dense developments around mass transit. Well, if I was desperately trying to get to Matt Iglesias' left so we could achieve the fabled crossover.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I did because there's this phenomenon called induced demand, which is when you build if you build it, the cars will come. If you build a highway, developers will build around it, and it won't solve congestion. It'll create congestion in that highway.
But doesn't it work both ways with mass transit and housing? Doesn't it work in both directions? Like if you got good mass transit, people will move there. If there's a bunch of people there, there's a demand for mass transit.
Well, yeah, that's the point. And with mass transit, induced demand is a good thing. We want that. Now, there are times when the development does not follow the mass transit. In L.A., we built a light rail line to the sea. Okay, it's a great thing, but they didn't get any zoning changes. So it's just a light rail line that goes through a bunch of garages and parks and sort of very non-dense, non-urban settings.
And that's what Matt wants to avoid.
Right, but eventually they'll change the zoning because developers will keep pressing for it. So, and the transit is right there. Nobody's doing it now because nobody wants density, so that everybody gets COVID. So anyway, I was it's a little, as you know, the infrastructure is divided into two plans. There's the hard infrastructure and the soft infrastructure.
That's nachos. Is soft or hard? That's soft, right? Nachos.
I claim nachos are hard. It's a lot harder than welfare-like child allowances, which is in the soft infrastructure.
I figured we were headed in that direction.
But the whole hard infrastructure, and it looks like they've divided it because the hard infrastructure. I mean, I guess you divide it because you can put together different coalitions for different bills. And the hard infrastructure gets some Republican buy-in; it's more popular. And the soft infrastructure, which includes the welfare-like child allowances and universal pre-K and a lot of community college money, that is sort of more an exclusively Democratic thing.
So is it going to be broken up into different bills and voted on separately?
It looks like it. It's all up in the air
because now the parliamentarian said they could use reconciliation twice, not just once.
Right. This gets into our the second topic. Before we get to that, I wanted to say it looks alarmingly like a 5-year plan. In other words, we're going to build 500,000 new units of housing, and Intel is going to be our national champion. We're going to have a semiconductor industry. It's all very alarmingly socialistic, but I'm not necessarily against it.
You know what I was excited about briefly associated with the infrastructure bill is on the how do you pay for it side, the global minimum corporate tax.
That seemed like a reasonable thing to try for.
Well, it sounded more one worldish than it actually is, I think. I mean, I thought they were going to get a bunch of countries like G20 countries or something to agree to harmonize their tax policies. But it sounds like what it is like an American corporation has to pay a minimum total tax of X when they add in what they're paying abroad and what they're paying to America. It's more like that, right?
I think so. I didn't quite follow it, but what seemed obvious to me was the idea that they're going to get this together by the time the infrastructure bill passes seems insane.
Seems ambitious.
It's a reasonable thing to do because the idea of the Trump tax cuts was, to lower the corporate tax rate so corporations would come here.
Right.
Well,
to avoid the race to the bottom.
If we get together with all the other countries and raise them in unison, then we don't create that distance.
Actually, I put it the wrong way. Trump wanted to join the race to the bottom. Biden wants to prevent the race to the bottom.
Right. So
I favor that. Prevent.
It's okay. I think the whole corporate tax thing, I think it's all a lightning rod to give the Republicans something to attack, and then they'll drop it or modify it. And
because who needs revenue these days?
Right.
That's old school.
Exactly. It's Katie bar the door. So anyway, on the parliamentarian thing, it's incredibly complicated, but there was some information. The first question is how many of these things could they do?
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know because all the parliamentarians said is, you may have another reconciliation modification. Okay, she didn't say how many. Okay, and it's very complicated because the reconciliation is actually 3 different bills, and they only did 2. There's a expenses bill, a revenue bill, and a debt limit reconciliation, and they only did 2 of the 3. So they might be able to do an extra debt limit reconciliation in addition to the other 2. Anyway, I think the original plan was to do the first. Do it all as part of next year's reconciliation bill, the 2022. Now it looks like they're going to get an extra one this year, but the key is there's a time limit of September 30th. So they got to get it all done by September 30th, which looks hard to do. So they may decide to punt it to next year's reconciliation anyway, and use the pre-September 30th reconciliation for something completely different, like the dream amnesty for immigrants, or some sort of Obamacare thing, or so it may not be an infrastructure thing at all. In which case, if they punt it all, they may want to cram it all together in one bill again, or they may or not.
If Matt Gaetz is our lodestar, doesn't he think this thing just isn't going to pass? I thought he was very pessimistic about this passing at all.
No, he thinks it'll pass, but with big modifications.
Oh.
He doesn't really express an opinion.
Well, what are the I mean, I would assume something this big has parts that are designed to be jettisoned under expected political pressure. Do we know what those are, and what is designed to stay in?
I don't. The conspicuous things that stick out to me are grants to get rid of exclusionary zoning. In other words, they don't have the balls to have a federal rule saying you can't have exclusionary zoning, by which I think they mean single-family zoning. But you wouldn't have to be. You could just say we need a mix, right? But that's very controversial.
Wait, single-family housing zoning is exclusionary? Isn't that the norm in residential?
In the debate, that's what the right wingers charge. I mean, in California, it's not just exclusionary, but they wanted to build more housing, so they wanted to get rid of all single-family zoning. It seems to me a sensible compromise would say we have some single-family houses. Each city has to build so many lower-income houses. We maybe allow granny flats in all single-family houses. I mean, there are hundreds of different things you could do before you just ban single-family zoning. But that's the way it's interpreted. Bizarrely, there's a very soft thing, which was a payoff to a union, which is home health care, which got elevated from the second soft human infrastructure bill into the first hard infrastructure bill, because it's a payoff basically to the SEIU, and it basically would try to tackle the long-term care crisis by subsidizing just home health care, not nursing homes, not all the other things you could do, but just do this one thing that this union likes. And it seems eminently jettisonable to me, or at least to put off till the second bill. Why is it going to increase productivity in this sector to unionize it? That's like the antithesis of productivity. And why emphasize home health care over nursing home care? I don't know. Iglesias makes that point. In general, the soft things are much more jettisonable than the hard things.
Well, do you agree that if Biden gets most of this passed, we can put him alongside LBJ in the annals of tremendous legislative accomplishment by presidents? No. Okay.
Nothing like instituting Medicare or Social Security. No.
Just asking. Some people are saying that.
LBJ did Medicare.
Okay.
And he wasted billions on the war on poverty.
Yeah, but he also had an assassinated president as political fuel. Biden doesn't have that.
Right, but I mean, this isn't as big as Clinton's welfare reform. Whatever you thought of that.
But you have heard this, right? That this would be. I don't mean this alone. I mean this in conjunction with COVID relief is what people are saying. It would be an impressive start. I mean, compared to say his predecessor. Remind me what his predecessor did.
And comparing it with expectations for Biden coming in, it's a huge achievement. But, Obama did what seemed like a huge infrastructure bill too, right?
I guess.
Paul Krugman is taking credit for subsidizing Tesla, allegedly a brilliant success. So Biden's doing a bunch more of that. It doesn't strike me as particularly epic. An immigration amnesty, much as I would hate it, would be epic. It would change our country forever. Okay, this is going to maybe stimulate some jobs and build some roads, et cetera, and start some new industries and allegedly, help combat climate change for, there's $650 billion to retrofit homes. If I were looking for something to jettison, that would be among the top ones, because I don't understand why the private industry can't retrofit homes. You would think
that doesn't fall into the classic definition of a public good, I would say. Yeah. But what does is interstate highways. I want to mention something infrastructure related, because our discussion last week drew a worthy of engaging comment on YouTube. It was about kind of the racialization of everything, to put it slightly hyperbolically, but the idea of, the question of whether Democrats should be emphasizing, identity politics more, or kind of class-based politics. And we were talking specifically about this plan to offer remedies to minority neighborhoods, that's the way it was being phrased, that had interstates inflicted upon them and other things via eminent domain. The idea was that they were the ones who paid the price for these highways that served other people. So, and I was saying, in keeping with my belief that the Democrats will be better off if they phrase as much as possible in terms of class politics, just define it as relief for low-income neighborhoods afflicted by these atrocities, or whatever they, You consider them. So this guy wrote in, both these gentlemen, meaning you and me, are extremely ignorant of the multifaceted harms of highway construction in minority neighborhoods. I don't have the energy to lay them all out, but basically all of the white communities, yes, even the poor ones, were able to fight off and or divert highway construction into adjacent black neighborhoods. Okay, I rest my case. I mean, this is kind of what I mean is like, if that is true, if all of the afflicted neighborhoods are minority neighborhoods, then you can define it without respect to race, and the beneficiaries will still be the minorities. They are the ones who will fit into the definition of a low-income neighborhood that has this inflicted on it, right? You take my point?
I very much doubt that that's true.
Okay, but I'm saying even taking it, if it's not true, then you have the other thing I consider a virtue, which is white people who, after all, vote too, benefiting, low-income white people benefiting from these policies and thinking, hey, I don't have to vote for Trump. Biden is a friend of working people. Now, in this case, we're talking about urban communities, so you're less likely to get the classic white Trump voter. But there are policies, and in fact, some of the things you're talking about in infrastructure with, the information infrastructure, extending, wireless or broadband or whatever the hell it is to rural neighborhoods. If you make that a policy you define in terms of low income, that'll help minorities, white people, be good for the country, good for the Democrats, and good for the country.
I'm for that. Biden is, however, in the business of racializing everything.
Well, it's funny. A friend of mine, I ran into him the other day, smart guy, and he thinks Biden, and he shares my concern about the over-racialization of policy and discourse. And he's a liberal like me. He's on the left. He has very strong left-wing credentials. He thought Biden was doing a good job of holding the tide. I'm not. How would you describe Biden's strategy with respect to this? Is it like he's going to talk the identity politics talk, but not walk the walk? Or because I think the talk is what does most of the damage. Actually,
is he going to pass an infrastructure bill that specifically says, blacks get more money than whites, or that has an explicit racial character?
I have heard it.
I think he'll avoid it, but there's $45 billion to correct infrastructure inequity. Well, I think it's probably he defines inequity in terms of race, not class.
Well, it's partly the way they choose to describe it when their people go out on, NPR and stuff, as much as what it actually says in the bill.
Everything is race. Everything's Jim Crow on steroids. He's going to put y'all in chains. Race is the Biden's demagogic go-to move.
By the way, you saw he got blowback for embracing the moving the All-Star game out of Georgia from no less than Stacey Abrams and John Ossoff.
Well,
they didn't like that.
They're scrambling because it's their state, and Stacey Abrams
it's
wants
kind of
to be
an
governor.
important state for Democrats, right? Be nice to hang on to it.
Yes, we don't know if Stacey Abrams was playing a double game. In other words, did she actually urge Major League Baseball to move it or to not move it? I don't quite know. And Warnock, the third guy, was hesitant to tell them not to move it. And if you really thought it was Jim Crow on steroids, you'd want to move it, as a National Review writer pointed out, if it was really that serious. So,
can I make one minor point, Mickey? Some people have been calling for moving the Masters, which is happening right now. Right. And I just want to explain that you can't move the Masters. You can cancel it, but it's like you can't move the Tour de France to Australia. Same thing. The Masters is only played on one golf tournament and on one golf course.
Well, you could declare some other course the Masters.
No, but you have to understand golf. It just literally people would be like, "What? Are you crazy? I'm not showing up." I mean, this is defined, and it's the only major championship that is defined by a course.
Yeah. Let the record show that the Masters is also the same contest on which Howell Raines broke his pick. Trying to get the golf club integrated by sex.
Well, it is now integrated by sex, though, right?
It has happened since then, yes. But
that was Hal Raines' big crusade. The deposed editor of the New York Times.
The famous story was CBS remains silent on. He was a whole crusade that he ginned up to the point of trying to shame people who didn't join the crusade, like CBS, which I believe was televised in the Masters. Anyway, I got sucked in to opposing him, but it was a sort of shameless example of a newspaper just deciding to declare a crusade that wasn't there before.
Speaking of the Times has escalated its description of Trump's characterization of the election. The standard thing had been baseless claim, right?
Right.
Well, here is the lead paragraph of a piece about how Trump is still kind of the center of gravity of the Republican Party. It's by Jonathan Martin and Nicholas Fandos. Here's the lead. Republican lawmakers are passing voting restrictions to pacify right-wing activists still gripped by former President Donald J. Trump's lie that a largely favorable election was rigged against them. Just noting that, I think that's a. I mean, they had used the word lie in some context, but this is new.
I do think that Trump's constant statement that he won is looking sort of worse and worse as time wears on. I don't know if that's because, I guess it's because very little evidence of fraud has emerged.
Oh yeah, it's total bullshit. I mean, it's worth remembering that they not all you hear about all these court cases. They filed 300 court cases, whatever the hell it was. Not once did an attorney representing Trump allege fraud because they didn't have any evidence of it. That was literally never the claim they made in an actual court of law.
I'm not sure that's still true, but
it was true as of January 6th.
There's some discrepancies that emerged in Montana. Of course, that's not a case where I assume Trump won Montana.
I'm just saying he was using the term fraud, but he knew he couldn't back it up in court at the time.
And Sidney Powell is now in total disrepute. One of the
who knew? By the way, my gripe with lie, the reason I don't like the word lie, well, there are more than one, but it just assumes that the person knew it was not true. And with Trump, who knows? Right. Who knows?
And also, this is an important point, and maybe I'm wrong, but there are all these people who say, well, it was, the lie was spread because the pro-Trump people failed to denounce and pronounce immediately that the election was fair and that Trump had lost. And the answer is, it's a little like I once, there was somebody once said that FDR had said something pissing on Social Security. The Bushies had promulgated this quote. And I got an email or something mass email from Al Franken saying, you should say immediately the FDR never said this. Well, I don't know what FDR said. A lot of crazy things. I don't know that FDR never said it. I didn't know on the day after the election whether there was fraud or not. So the idea that the responsible thing for pro-Trump people to do was to come forward and say, this election is fair and square. There was no fraud when we didn't know it is sort of crazy. And that would have just driven people more insane because it would be so obviously people just moving in lockstep to what
I thought the thing to do was just to describe it as unsubstantiated claims, which is still technically what it is. And anyway, that's ancient history, but
not enough to satisfy my liberal friends. I mean, I think you say, Trump, look, if there's fraud, he has there are procedures, he can show it. If he has in their time limits, and if he goes and shows it, fine. If he doesn't show it, he's lost the election. That's the way we play the game.
So, Mickey, are you following the Derek Chauvin trial?
Not really. I read Ann Coulter's column in the early stages of the trial
and tweeted it.
Sorry?
And tweeted it. That's how I became aware of it. You tweeted it.
And it looked like it was going badly for the prosecution because some of the cops that they had called, the prosecution had called, admitted that, well, Chauvin would have been justified in using a stun gun or a taser on the guy, and that the putting his knee on the guy's neck was the lesser force than that. So that seemed to be a good point for Chauvin. Now they have some medical experts who say that he was really killed by the knee and not by the massive amount of fentanyl in his blood. And I just haven't followed that.
Was it a massive amount?
Yeah, I think remember we had talked about this last week. It was 33, and it's 3 has been known to kill people. So
although what constitutes a lethal dose, I think, has to do with your both your body mass and how much of the stuff you do. So if you're an habitual user,
right,
but the thing, go ahead.
He had a lot of fentanyl, and there's a disputed audio recording where he seems to be saying, "I took too many drugs."
You mean during the thing? During the incident, as he's dying?
No, right before before that.
It's disputed. It's like
it's apparently hard to hear.
It's like the Beatles album that says Paul is dead if you play it backwards.
Correct.
I think maybe the prosecution's making a mistake in making the question of the cause of death like an either or thing, which it sounds like you're doing too. Was it fentanyl? Was it, the knee on the neck? Because, look, here are 2 statements, you could make. Had it not been for the knee on the neck, he wouldn't have died. Had it not been for the fentanyl, he would have died. It's possible that both are true, right?
Right.
But you can't, I would say the cop is still responsible. If not treating him in a way he didn't have to treat him, would have left him alive, then the cop is responsible. I mean, especially since it's such a mystery why he treated him that way for so long. It's a complete.
But it's also true that if there's a chance he would have lived but for the knee, you still have to look at whether he was justified in using the knee.
Sure, that question is obviously there.
If the procedures say he could have used a stun gun, that then maybe he's justified. Plus, it seemed completely clear from my just sort of cursory watching of it that the key problem was it took forever for the ambulance to arrive. They were legitimately expecting the ambulance to arrive a lot earlier.
That wasn't under the cop's control. The question is, why did he keep the knee there long? The guy was completely motionless. I mean, he didn't even say, "Okay, I'm gonna lift up my knee, and if you behave," I mean, it was crazy. And I think it may have had, the one thing the defense is pushing is the idea that the cop was surrounded by an angry crowd, and that explains the way he behaved. Well, first of all, if I'm got my knee on a guy's neck and I'm surrounded by an angry crowd that tells me to get my knee off and I'm starting to feel threatened, I would take my knee off. Now I think maybe what's going on is more like the kind of classic cop's fear of showing the fear that you will lose control of a situation if you ever give an inch, that your authority has to be unquestioned.
People have been known to come back with renewed ferocity even after slipping into a drug coma. So he was handcuffed. He was handcuffed. He was handcuffed and surrounded by cops. How big a danger is that? Well, I think. Look, I'm just saying what their argument would be. If he kicked up a fuss and the crowd joined in on his side, the cops would be in trouble. That's what they would worry about.
If the crowd turns on the cops, they're toast in any event. I mean, it doesn't matter what.
Right, but so they want to keep everything static until this fucking ambulance arrives.
Well, they kept them pretty damn static. Now this I do think this last. I think things have gone pretty well for the prosecution, but this Dr. Tobin yesterday, who was hailed as, I think, a success for the prosecution in most media. I don't know. I thought it was kind of a weird, he was weirdly precise. He looked at first I saw him, he looked at the video and he said, well, you can tell he has half of his weight on George Floyd. And first of all, I thought, well, how would you know that? I mean, but then it turns out he was way more precise. He said 86.9 pounds on Floyd's neck. And he also, this gets back to what I started on. He asserted that the drugs, whatever, had nothing to do with it. If I'm recalling correctly, it was only the knee. Well, look, you're going to get expert witnesses saying the opposite, and those are going to be the last ones that the jury hears. It seems to me you should frame this in a way that renders the prosecution's case impervious to that kind of thing. In other words, make the point that, look, what was the name of the guy, the original I Can't Breathe guy? I think, wasn't he overweight or something?
The cigarette, he was selling illicit cigarettes in New York.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So suppose somebody argued, well, if he hadn't been overweight, assuming everything, then this wouldn't have, then the cop wouldn't have killed him. Okay. But it was a fact. Okay. Yeah. And the cop, you've got to try to treat people in a way that regardless of the pre-existing conditions, they don't die. Besides which, the cop said he knew there were drugs in George Floyd's system. But I just think the prosecution's making a mistake in making it sound as if the jury's going to have to choose. Could the fentanyl have killed him? If so,
You're assuming that the prosecution has infinite power to shape the expert's testimony or find a new expert. And maybe that's not the case. They got to deal with what the expert really thinks. So,
well, they choose their expert witnesses.
Right. But it sort of gives the game away if you assume that they can sort of manipulate the testimony. They can take care of that in argument. The key question to my mind is, suppose it goes all Chauvin's way, and it hasn't, obviously. Would anybody have the balls to acquit? No. I don't think I would. You'd have to move to a different town.
I have no idea what the composition of the jury is. Look, people who want Chauvin acquitted. Why couldn't people like that be on the jury? Sounds like maybe you do. Do you think he should be acquitted?
I don't know. My instinct was certainly watching the video. The instinct was no, but
there are people,
but
it only takes one.
We do know what the composition of the jury is. It's just we don't know it. There are. I think it's like 6 white people, 4 black people, and 2 in between. Something like that. And the white people are young, so they're likely to be. I mean, this thing liberal.
Wound up getting so politicized that you can imagine somebody who just didn't like the direction that the BLM protest took, kind of tending to want Chauvin to get off the hook.
They would get death threats and they'd have to leave town. I mean, if you're willing to go to a witness identity program,
nobody knows which. The jurors' vote is secret.
It's unanimous, Bob. But
if one person keeps him from convicting,
well, it's pretty much clear. It would come out. It would come out who it was.
Well, it shouldn't.
I know, but I think it would in this case. Anyway, so all that leads you to think that there's going to be a compromise verdict and he's going to be found guilty of something.
So
can I go back to Trump for 1 second?
I never tire of going back to Trump.
Well, all my friends these Republicans like Byron York and all my friends are convinced that Trump isn't going to run. And I don't quite know why they think that. I guess he's going to be really old. And I guess they think he's sort of discredited, which he is. He's discredited in my eyes. I mean, just blowing the Georgia race is enough to make me never want him to run again. And his presidency wasn't that successful. So the pandemic disqualifies him too. But he's going to be sitting around with nothing to do, bored out of his mind. And if he decides he wants to entertain himself by running again, he's going to run again. I mean, why is everybody so confident that he's not going to? And I think it's sort of wishful thinking. I think they can encourage people like DeSantis.
Well, wait, what is their argument? Why do they?
They don't make an argument. They just say, "Oh, he's not going to run again."
He doesn't really seem old for his age. He's probably taking testosterone, and that would tend to encourage him to run. I could see him running. I just think, I think he would not like the risk of losing a second time. Some
people say that without Twitter, without a platform, he has, he'll just be ignored. But we'll see. He's now endorsed a couple of people in Senate races. He endorsed Mo Brooks in Alabama, and we'll see if his word carries weight. I think it probably will. So I don't know. I wish he would not run, but I have no confidence that will happen.
Well, who I now think will not run as the surrogate Trump candidate, even though he's quite Trumpist in his politics?
Josh Hawley.
Matt Gaetz. I'm going out on a limb here.
Gaetz is an interesting case.
He's actually a smart guy. Well, he was
he's actually a smart. I joined in the heaping abuse on Gaetz because he had come out against Jeff Sessions in a craven act of Trump suck-uppery and supported Tommy Tuberville, who has to be one of the stupidest people in American politics. And Sessions was a very, very effective, especially on the immigration issue. He caught he would catch little fine things that the Democrats would try to sneak in, and he would object to them and get them taken out of the bill. Tuberville's not going to do that. Tuberville was a setup to sell out on a bunch of issues. But I learned last night, and it's true, I think, Gaetz is one of the most anti-interventionist Republicans. He gave a speech attacking Lynn Cheney for endless wars.
But wasn't that only after she became vulnerable after January 6th, or was it not?
Yeah, it was after the
I think he's a complete opportunist.
I saw some articles saying he was, thought for himself on issues of war. I haven't followed them up, but opportunism is one thing. But if he, actually is an effective spokesman for non-intervention, I'm not so sure I want to hound him out of.
Don't you think it's kind of hilarious that we're talking about his political credentials when obviously his ship is about to capsize?
I'm not so sure. I mean, it probably is. You get an incredible. I got incredible positive feedback. I got a lot of hits when I ridiculed him, and he's sending out these ridiculous fundraising letters with the box for a recurring donation pre-checked to them. They're coming to get me. You have to support me.
But look, a couple of things now seem fairly clear based on recent reporting, if it's to be taken at face value. Leaving aside the question of whether it was a 17-year-old prostitute, it now seems clear that he Venmo'd, is that the app, money to his friend, this crazy guy, former tax collector for some county in Florida, Greenberg.
Seminole County, yeah.
Who in turn, he sent $900 to him, and I think mentioned the name of one of the women that Greenberg then sent. These several women, he sent a total of exactly $900 to. It's pretty clear. Like Greenberg, he was Gaetz's wingman, and one of his functions was to be the intermediary for money Gaetz paid to prostitutes.
Was he Gaetz's wingman or was Gaetz his wingman?
No. I just read this piece in Politico where they actually use the word wingman. I mean, it stands to reason. Look, Gaetz is in Congress. This guy is some has-been, tax collector. No, Greenberg was definitely the beta male in this case. And in addition, one way apparently, so for purposes apparently of patronizing prostitutes, Greenberg wanted to have ID cards that had his picture on them, but someone else's name.
Right. And
you know what a tax collector has access to? Lots of people's ID cards. Right. And there was apparently, and so that was a game of his, but apparently there was surveillance video of him and Matt Gaetz going into the room where the IDs were. Okay, so I think Gaetz will not be America's next president. I'm going out on a limb here.
He's got it. But there is the Ralph Northam precedent, which is if you tough it out, sometimes you tough it out.
Hey, Andrew Cuomo, he's still there. He's still there, folks. You know.
Also, Gaetz is not really a hypocrite in the sense he didn't pretend that he was anything but a douchebag in the sex department. Now, you would think using sugardaddy.com or whatever website they used, whatever service they used would be politically embarrassing. But hey, if you don't pretend you're anything else, of course, if you're in sugardaddy.com, you're going to be Venmoing a lot of money to a lot of people.
Well, no, that website is their defense because that website was just on the right side of the law, I think, in that technically what's supposed to happen with that website is that you meet women who would be happy for you to buy them dinner and perhaps a diamond ring, and then we'll see what happens. In other words, it's supposed to not involve just cash transactions, but now they seem to have evidence of just flat out cash transactions, and that's the problem. There's also
you can give flowers, but you can't give cash. That's the legal line. I
believe that is probably a legal distinction too. Plus, it would take a lot of flowers. You know, these Gaetz. You know, these are high class women.
I kept waiting for my friend Chuck Johnson to be involved somehow, because if you know him, he's the
crazy
redheaded scourge,
crazy redheaded
who's actually done some good things, but and he wasn't involved, except it turns out he is the man who introduced Gaetz to his fiancée. So
who is the sister of Palmer Luckey of the Oculus fame, Silicon Valley rich guy and Trump supporter.
Yeah.
There's one more thing on Gaetz. This is something that broke last week, so we only mentioned it in the Parrot Room. Pause to let the phrase Parrot Room sink in for marketing purposes. Anyway, but a week later, almost nobody's picked up on this, but it's super bizarro. Okay, this was in the American Conservative, written by an apparently credible journalist named Arthur Bloom. You may know him because he was deputy editor of Daily Caller. Now he's editor of the American Conservative's online operation. Real guy. He got a hold of these screenshots of texts that between Scott Adams, the Dilbert creator and Trump supporter, and this guy, Jake Novak, the media director of the Israeli consulate in New York. What? It seems obvious that Adams leaked them to him.
Right. Yeah. Well, this has gotten press. People have talked about it.
Has it?
Yeah.
But have any mainstream media things picked? It's super bizarre.
I don't know, but that feeds into the idea that because he was, this is the, what can I say? I'm looking for my tinfoil hat here. It's here somewhere.
Definitely do. This is a good time for it.
Here we go.
You actually keep it handy, or is that what? Is that what the whatever they were? Not Doritos. What were they?
No, this is my tinfoil hat. But he's anti-neocon and anti-interventionist, and the Israelis got him. They were out to get him, and they have this weird conspiracy, and they've managed to implicate him, and they're getting rid of one of their opponents. That would be the tinfoil hat conspiracy.
You should definitely keep that tinfoil hat on, both because it actually looks really good, but it makes you really should be wearing it when you're saying shit like this. Well, let me tell people what.
Why is that crazy?
Well, first, let's tell people what the story is, because I don't think it's gotten much.
The story is very. I'm vague on the details, so tell me the story.
So. The basic idea is this media director of the Israeli consulate, Jake Novak, conveys to Scott Adams in these screenshots that neither of them has challenged the authenticity of, basically tells him that, remember, Gaetz had alleged that what's happened here, there were no prostitutes. It's just that these guys wanted to extort money out of him, and they said they could get the Justice Department to drop the charges or something if his dad gave them a lot of money, and Gaetz, and then this was somehow connected to a plan to extract this guy Bob Levinson from Iran, a U.S. federal officer of some kind who was thought to be dead a long time ago, right? But still. The idea emerged that somehow the same guys who were extorting, they wanted Gaetz's father to give them money to get this to help rescue Bob Levinson, and they were using this Justice Department case or these allegations to help put the screws on Gaetz's dad. It was weird, but anyway, what emerges in this exchange is that this guy from the Israeli consulate says, no, this was already going on. And now that I found out that Gaetz is under investigation, that's a complication for us or something. And here's a quote. In other words, he's saying the plan to, This guy says he was part of the plan to get Bob Levinson out of Iran. This guy, Jake Novak, says that.
Why would you ask Gaetz to give the money if you weren't extorting him?
Well, I don't know, but this guy's claim is that was already happening before the whole prostitution thing broke. Because this guy texts, he writes, quote, Gaetz's dad was secretly funding us. So I'm very much wanting this to be untrue, meaning the new news about the process. He says, quote, I've got a commando team leader friend of mine nervously waiting for the wire transfers to clear.
Right.
And that's the money that's coming from Gaetz's dad. This claim, I can look at, try to find all the, I can look at the other screenshots. There's a bunch of them, but it's.
But what's the upshot? If Gaetz is guilty of whatever was supposed to be covered up, then he's still in trouble, right?
Yeah, he's in trouble. I mean, here's the exchange. Scott Adams says the allegations against him do not sound credible. And this Jake guy from the Israeli consulate says, I don't want to believe them, but my source says it looks bad from closer in. Scott Adams says, I'm betting against it, but the extortion counterclaim sounds credible. And so, and now this guy, he says he has witnesses, and now this guy disabuses him of the credibility of the extortion counterclaim by saying, look, he says, the backstory is this is screwing up my efforts to free Bob Levinson. Okay. Gaetz's dad was secretly funding us, blah, blah, blah.
Okay. Well,
I just.
So that's what the guy says. What it doesn't. And that makes you think a little more that Gaetz is guilty of.
It sounds like the bigger question is, how did it come to, if this is true? And, I briefly entertained the idea that Scott Adams and this guy actually faked the exchange so that they could serve some larger goal with this, but I couldn't think of what that would be. So you have to ask, if this is true, why was Matt Gaetz's dad funneling money to try to get a guy out of Iran that everybody thought was dead? And why is the Israeli consulate involved? He's an American. Right. Levinson is an American.
I believe that fits with my tinfoil theory.
Oh, but come on. You're going back to like they're extorting Matt Gaetz to get him to shut up about a speech a theme he actually rarely visited about American interventionism.
If you were worried about the right wing turning anti-Israel and anti-interventionist more than anti-Israel, which Israel certainly is, Gaetz is a guy you'd want to take out as before he got too far.
But then you wouldn't try to extort money from him. You just say, quit talking about this stuff.
That's right.
So there goes your theory, assuming there was the money transfer. This is crazy, but I don't know. This goes beyond the prostitution thing. It's crazy. Unless
somehow they were in league with these tax collector of Seminole County and in terms of enlisting Gaetz as in his fake ID sugar daddy scheme.
Well, you are connecting dots at least.
Okay, there you go.
Final quote from Novak in these texts. The real documents do not extort, meaning we weren't extorting money. He says, and we only asked for 25 million as an estimate at first. He says, we came way down. So what? They only got 5 million from Matt Gaetz's father. I am.
Why is a guy from the Israeli consulate putting together this crazy scheme anyway, even if it would be complicated by the extortion?
This is my question. It leads to a question of, what was Bob Levinson? I don't know. I'm sure there's a rich literature about Bob Levinson. I haven't even Googled him yet. Anytime anybody dies or is thought to die in the Middle East, theories abound. But I don't know. With
the Trump thing, DeSantis is obviously the guy of the moment, and I sense he's going to be. There's a huge disappointment in store because he seems to be a pretty conventional Republican with sort of Trumpist affect. Mm-hmm. I mean, the media is against him because of the COVID thing, and and he puts them down and calls them fake news. But he's actually sort of centrist in some ways. He's had some environmental initiatives. He's actually been a pretty good governor. So I think, and the big question is, what are his views on immigration? It's possible that he's just a better version of Jeb, and there'll be a huge disappointment if that turns out to be the case. But
you worry about his actual commitment to Trumpist immigration views.
I worry about everybody's commitment to Trumpist immigration. I certainly worry about Trump's commitment to Trumpist immigration. Yes.
I think that's actually fairly heartfelt. Isn't there relatively early evidence of those kinds of sentiments on Trump's part? I thought there was.
Yes, but he also seemed to want to cut a deal, and he was influenced by business people. Anyway, he's old news. He's the former president.
So you worry about DeSantis.
You never know what these guys are going to do once they get lobbied by businessmen. Yes.
So you're holding out the torch for Josh Hawley.
No, I'm hoping that J.D. Vance wins his Senate race.
I don't think that guy
immediately turns on his heels and runs for president.
Guy has no experience, no relevant experience. Correct? No administrative experience, no political experience.
He has as much experience as John Ossoff. A lot more experience. He's a venture capitalist, and he wrote a book, and he's a good talker, and et cetera, et cetera. His main problem seems to be a guy named Josh Mandel, who's a two-time loser he's running against, but who's polling quite well.
Well, if Vance...
So he may not win the primary, but...
If Vance has the good fortune to run against a candidate as unappealing as the candidate John Ossoff ran against, maybe he'll win. Otherwise, I don't see it. But look, that probably will happen. I don't see... What do you see on the Democrat side? I mean, they're grooming Kamala Harris. I have seen no evidence that she has substantial support. I personally have never been a fan. I don't know anybody. Well, my wife's kind of fan-ish, but and the thing is, she's an equal opportunity antagonizer. Like my highly woke daughter doesn't like her. The friends I know my age of my political, more moderate liberals.
Why does your woke daughter? Why do your woke daughter doesn't like her? Because she was a prosecutor?
The specific record. I think they sense that she's not the real thing. I mean,
she's transparently a phony. Yes.
She is. That's the thing. What is the real Kamala Harris? What does she actually stand for? And people don't want a president who giggles all the time either.
She stands for Kamala Harris. She only does root causes, Bob. She's in charge of stopping the flow at the border, but she won't go to the border and will only talk about dealing with the root causes of Central America.
Wait, didn't Biden put her in charge of a second thing, or is it still just stopping the flow of...
As far as I know, it's just stopping the flow.
Oh, that reminds me. Was it here in the Parrot Room that you said, Bob, is it true you wrote the pro-NAFTA editorial for the New Republic?
I forget.
Well, just quickly, I want to say something.
Andrew Sullivan put me up to that.
I want to say something. I believe it's true that I did, but first of all, as I said last time, I said we want strong labor and environmental accords, but then I remembered another thing I put in. And look, I am still largely pro-economic engagement. You want a good deal and you want to be careful about the consequences. I still think it's a fundamentally good thing. But of relevance to you, I now remember, I think, a line I threw in, which is like, people worry about immigration from Mexico. And look, one way to relieve the pressure is to foster economic development in Mexico, right? Better jobs in Mexico,
right? Which
kind of makes sense. And I was just going to ask you, is it, I'm not saying there's a connection, but is it not the case that at least recently the immigration pressure is not coming from Mexico? It's coming from Central America, right?
It was until recently, but now it's coming from Mexico too.
Oh.
The Mexican economy was doing great, and Mexico had stopped sending as many migrants, and Central America was ramping up. But recently, with COVID, I think the Mexican economy has not been doing its job, and more people are coming here.
Okay. Speaking of COVID, vaccine passports, for or against?
I have no opinion on it. I don't understand why it's such a big issue, but it seems to me you can't stop businesses from using whatever passport they want.
Totally. Look, what I would say is, if you choose not to get vaccinated, first of all, you are exposing the rest, all other Americans to at least marginally greater risk by virtue of doing that. And for that reason, one could certainly argue that the government, in principle, has the authority to compel vaccination. I guarantee you that if this thing were like 5 times as lethal and twice as transmissible as it is, that would be the consensus. Yeah, we got to force everybody to get vaccinated. But hey, we're not doing that, But listen, if I and other people who've been vaccinated want to gather somewhere, secure in the knowledge that everyone else has been vaccinated, we're going to do that.
But
and
the question is,
if a commercial enterprise wants to facilitate that, that is their right.
Can you condition like essential things like being able to go to school or
that's a different
go into government buildings or get food?
School is a very challenging issue, I grant. That's not what I'm talking about.
But I don't understand what the whole fuss about that. The passports are very easily forgeable unless you make them so unforgeable that they're the basis for a national identity card.
Well,
I don't particularly mind national identity cards. So
no, I think they would to work. They would have to probably carry us into new and in some ways scary territory in terms of.
But yeah. Anyway, I'm not all hyped up about it. As long as we brought up the reconciliation issue, I just want to. I mean, it seems to me it's likely that Schumer will win. None of the arguments I've read seem to preclude the idea that we're going to have a bifurcated bird rule government where if you do it in reconciliation, if it involves changing the budget, taxes, and benefits, you can do it with a majority vote. If it's not subject to reconciliation, i.e. if it's subject to the bird rule objection that it's not budgetary, then it goes into this gridlock system where you need 60 votes in the Senate and nothing happens. So that seems crazy, but it also seems to me that there might be a crude logic to it, which is that budgetary things are the most easily reversible usually. And so you raise taxes, you lower taxes, you can do it by majority vote, but you can always change it back if you don't like it. And some of the things that would not be subject to the 50 pure majority vote, like immigration and war and environmental changes and cultural changes. Cultural changes are reversible, but immigration, war, and environment are not reversible. You maybe want a supermajority for them. And cultural changes, you may not want to go back and forth on the whim of the majority, deciding, well, gay marriage is okay, gay marriage is bad. Trans athletes are good, trans athletes are bad. You may want a 60-vote majority before the federal government puts its foot down. So there might be it might actually make sense, this insane system. But then I thought about gun control, and it's pretty clear gun control is reversible. Yet gun control is clearly in the 60-vote bin. So it doesn't quite make sense.
Speaking of gun control,
a little crazy.
So yeah. Biden is by executive order banning these things called, I guess, ghost guns, which means things you assemble yourselves. And at first I thought, well, by definition, if he can do it by executive order, it's meaningless bullshit. But then I realized, does this apply to, using 3D printers to make guns? Because I think that includes non-metal guns that can evade, metal detectors and stuff. I mean, that could conceivably be important. I think so. If they can enforce
the main impact is kit guns, I think.
Yeah, but if it applies to because the 3D printing thing is alarming from my point of view. I mean, if you've got 3D printers and you've got the recipe for a gun, you can transmit it to your friends via the internet. They make their own guns. This is a new kind. It's plastic. It can get through metal detectors, blah, blah, blah.
Seems alarming to me. I agree.
Well, it is. And you ask, how are they going to, how do you even crack down on it if you have the legal authority? And you get back to kind of creepy invasion of privacy issues, perhaps.
Intrusive inspections, the solution to everything.
Unprecedentedly. Is that intrusive inspection? Is that your phone?
No, that's my timer going off. We've been doing it for an hour.
Okay, does that mean we should go adjourn and then reconvene before long in the Parrot Room?
Sure, unless there's something else we wanted to talk about that was non-parrotable?
Everything's parrotable. It's just that some things are only parrotable.
The one other thing I thought of bringing up was United Airlines saying 50% of their pilots are going to be blacks or women in their training program. That seemed really pushing the limit of public acceptability for race and sex preferences.
For the preferences, you mean? Why? Because people will get on the get on the airplane because they'll think
people want expert pilots piloting their planes. Yes, and maybe you'll choose another airline that doesn't have these rules.
We all know that pilots don't fly the planes; computers do.
If only. No, there are all these things where we don't have. It would. There are a lot of situations with hijackers where if you just say, sorry, the computer's taken over, we're landing wherever we're landing, the computer's running it, that would be useful. But we're not at that stage yet. The computers can't take over a flight. So I think the pilots do make a big difference.
Yeah, well, if they put it the way you said it, that's in their training program. They're not guaranteeing anything about graduation rates.
They claim that their standards are the same, but if you, it's sort of tautological. Every person who meets our standards meets our standards. Well, have you watered down your standards is the question.
Okay.
So anyway, I was alarmed by that, but.
So we should do our Parrot Room promotional segue and our promotion in general. Your newsletter is Kausfiles. Mine's the Nonzero newsletter.
It's going to be a good Parrot Room because I'm going to cancel myself.
Ooh, good.
On a race issue.
I'm writing it down. Mickey cancels self.
I'm going to we're going to talk about that Slate dialogue we had.
Okay, I want to.
Which was really mighty weird, if you ask me.
Okay, let me tell people what we're going to talk about specifically in the Parrot Room, which you can gain access to, by the way, at patreon.com/Parrot Room. So Slate, their Slow Burn podcast has become kind of famous, I think. Each year they do this highly produced series. I think they did one on Watergate, and now they're doing one on the Iraq War. And so they convened a number of us who were associated with Slate at the time of the Iraq War. Many had favored it. A few had opposed. And my question, I'm going to ask you the question in the Parrot Room. Don't tell me the answer now. I almost emailed you this question right away. And then I thought, don't waste the time to save for the Parrot Room. The question is,
were you too hot?
That's so close. That is so close. See, that's my answer. You blew it, Mickey. My question was going to be, was I too big an asshole, or conceivably not enough of an asshole, or just the right sized asshole?
Okay.
And
I will answer that question.
This question, folks, will be answered in the Parrot Room. Also, maybe talk a little golf. They got the data recorder from the car Tiger Woods was driving when he had that accident. I want to discuss that. But also the Masters is going on. I want to ask you about Enoch Powell. Does that name mean anything to you, Mickey?
Sure, although I'm not an expert on his Rivers of Blood speech.
I just came across a fascinating clip of Dick Cavett interviewing him decades ago and wanted to reminisce about the...
I want to talk about muons, if you pronounce it correctly. Because you tweeted about muons, and I tweeted about
more
muons.
Specifically, a phrase that's in this in this big paper, I guess, about a finding that may force us to abandon the standard model of particle physics. But the phrase is muons magnetic moment.
Okay,
that's good.
And I also want to talk about the greatest uninvestigated story of the decade, which I won't tell you.
Wow, we
what
got
it
a
is.
lot in the Parrot Room. I mean, it could be then, that we break 800 patrons this week because we're tantalizingly close. Could happen. And remind us, Mickey, what the 800 patron get. I think 700. You gave them a foot massage. The 700. And the 800th is what?
I wasn't. I'll serenade them with my guitar.
Oh, but that could only happen on Zoom. I think they want,
They want Matt Gaetz like in person.
Yeah, they want a Matt Gaetz like experience with you.
Okay, well, they're not going to get it. So anyway, I think the Parrot Room will be better than what we've just done.
You know why I think it? Because I'm about to drink. I'm about to drink a lot of coffee because I only got 4 hours of sleep last night.
I don't think what we just did was our best effort.
I believe it wasn't. And I blame my not getting enough sleep, which I blame on somebody else. But
I blame it that we were talking about infrastructure.
I wasn't going to go there, Mickey, but, you'll notice that cable news, the ratings conscious cable news shows don't generally lead with infrastructure. But I wasn't going to go there.
They actually stopped covering the Chauvin trial when it went badly for the prosecution.
You think it's because they can make anything seem good, can't they?
Apparently not. But it was pretty boring, I think, for a while. Maybe it's heating up now. Anyway, that reminds us never to talk about infrastructure ever again.
Or save it for the very end of the Parrot Room,
We should have another room for, I guess that's what the weeds is for.
Okay, am I now allowed, if you ever lead again with infrastructure, am I allowed to say Mickey?
Yes.
Like that? Okay, excellent.
So then infrastructure rule.
Okay, so this whole ordeal has been worth it then, if I've acquired that power. Okay.
Okay.
We will see you in the Parrot Room.
Okay, wait, let me get out the parrot and say goodbye.
Folks, if you're not sold on the Parrot Room yet, wait till you hear this.
No infrastructure.
See what I mean? It just sells itself. Okay. See you there.
See you later.
Oh, he closed strong by admitting how weak we were the rest of the time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was the interest. I was goaded by my brother, who said you should stop sniping at the process and say whether you're for this or not. So that was my mistake. Never listen to my brother.
Whether you're for run.
What?
Okay. So what time do you think we're going to do this?
What, it's like 4:30? 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's fine. I'll see you at 6.
Okay, I'll send off the audio first.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right, see you.
Sorry about this. Yeah, bye.